Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we are going to take a look at another of these Wildlife Wow figures, and it's actually the last one that I have currently in my collection. I have to acquire some more. I know they have a Spinosaurus, and I would love to review that at some point. And I think they have a few more. I'm not too sure because I'm not very familiar with the line, but I have seen some of the figures a few different times, especially at Hobby Lobby. But this one here is their Allosaurus, and it's probably the weakest, I would say, of the bunch. The ones I've reviewed so far would have been the Carnotaurus, the Tyrannosaurus, the Velociraptor, and now here is the Allosaurus. And I feel like the overall appearance of this Allosaurus just is not really that great, and kind of has more of like a vintage feel to it. Even if the tail is up in the air, I feel like the overall sculpting really doesn't look very good as far as accuracy goes to what we would imagine an Allosaurus looks like. But again, I don't know when the figure was made, so maybe we can let that slide. Being a National Geographic figure, you would expect accuracy. However, all of their figures so far, besides the Carnotaurus, but the Rex and the Velociraptor seem very Jurassic Park inspired. This one doesn't really seem inspired from anything that I'm aware of, but again, the sculpt just isn't really that updated. It's not as nice as I would expect, as accurate as I would expect from National Geographic, but considering we don't know when it was made, maybe this is kind of what we expected the Allosaurus to look like when the figure was produced. But regardless, let's go ahead and get a closer look at this figure right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt, you can see the head sculpt is pretty nice. It's nothing overly flashy or anything as far as the detailing goes, but the sculpt and detail that is included definitely has a pretty nice appearance to it. The figure overall, mine specifically, is really beat up. It's the most beat up out of all of the figures that I have. I actually got this one in a lot with a few other figures on the Facebook Marketplace, so you can see overall that the figure, even the tail, is missing here at the end, so that is really unfortunate, and I would kind of like to get a hold of another at some point just to have in my collection that's in better shape than this one. But you can see that for the most part some of the paint has been chipped off here and there, and the dinosaur figure overall is in fairly bad shape, so you'll have to bear with me as far as reviewing this one. The eyes are painted here with a yellowish coloration, nice black pupil. They don't look great, but they don't look terrible. For the most part, I think the head sculpt looks somewhat like an Allosaurus head sculpt, but again, also not exactly. You've got the teeth sculpted out here. They are not sculpted out individually. They're all kind of meshed together, but then painted sort of across because the teeth are elaborated out a little bit, so they could have just done a nice little dry brushing, and it has elaborated the teeth pretty nicely. It doesn't look bad, honestly. And then you've got the inside of the mouth painted with a pretty realistic coloration, a nice tongue sticking out there. It doesn't really have too much detail to it, nor does the roof of the mouth, but I think it has a little bit. It looks pretty decent, as does the skin flap there on the inside of the mouth, also looks okay. You've got the nostrils sculpted out up here on the tip of the snout, and then you've kind of got like that Allosaurus crest running along the upper side of the skull, and it's kind of painted with like a pinkish brown type of a coloration, whereas the rest of the face is a nice blue, and then a lighter underside here to the jaw, the lower jaw. As you start to run down the neck, you can see some ridges that run along the spinal column and some osteoderms that run down along the side of the animal. That's not something I see often associated with Allosaurus, so it's kind of surprising to see that here. However, it looks kind of cool, I guess, on the figure. Running down the neck, you can see some pretty nice skin texture, a few wrinkles as we do lead down the neck. You can also see those wrinkles in the throat, kind of some skin folding going on. It looks pretty cool, gives the skin a little bit of movement to show a little bit of detail. Same deal on the other side, kind of the same thing actually. And the Allosaurus's head is kind of sticking straight forward, so you wouldn't really see too much difference on either side as far as the detail goes, so I think that's pretty much what you would expect. And the wrinkling, I would rather have seen more stretching of the skin going on down here, and more wrinkling in this area, because the Allosaurus has its head lifted up into the air a little bit. You can see it's pulling its head up this way, but I think it still looks decent. Coming down here into the body, you can see the shoulder blade protruding from the skin a little bit there. As we lead down into the arm, you can see the seam where the arm is connected, but I don't think it's too distracting or anything. It's actually not even really all that noticeable, but it is there. As you come out to the hands, you can see the hands have a little bit of paint chipped off of them, as do the nails, but I think honestly they look pretty decent, and they probably would have looked good when they were initially painted and everything. It's just that the rough play that clearly has occurred with this figure at some point in time has taken a toll on it. I may fix that a little bit at some point in time, but I'm not entirely sure. due to the tail missing here at the end. I don't really know how much of a point in restoring this figure there really is. The ridges that run along the spinal column continue to run down the back, as do these osteoderms that follow along the same trail as those ridges, just down here on the side a little bit. We get to the thigh, you can see some musculature. The skin texture is definitely there, but there's not really too much going on in the thigh. Like, you can see some pretty nice scaling up here, and even on the upper part of the thigh. But then once we get down into this area, it kind of mutes itself a little bit. Then we come down into the leg, you can see the kneecap is present there. Fairly nice looking calf muscles, and then we get down into the foot. The foot looks really nice scoot-like appearance down the toes. Pretty similar, honestly, to the Tyrannosaurus that we had reviewed from the Wildlife WoW figures previously. And it's also a hard plastic, as are the hands and arms, similar to all of the others so far in the line. You do have the dew claw over there, it is painted, as well as the nails down here on the feet are painted with a nice blackish coloration. Again, some of the nails have the paint rubbed off of them. You've got some nice skin detail right here. I do like that little area. And then as we move out the tail comes up, has a nice curve. Would have had a nice point to the tail, but that is gone now. But you can see the skin texture looks pretty nice. You've got some nice skin detail as far as movement shown throughout the sculpt as well. Looking at the opposing side, there's not really too much, honestly, that you're going to find on this side that you didn't see on the previous side, because if you look at the legs, they're pretty much in a neutral position. The arms are almost in a neutral position, they're just ever so slightly different, so there's not really too much shown in the sculpt of this side that we didn't see already on the previous side. Primarily the coloration of the figure is just this blue, but you can see a few areas have like a darker blue sort of added that do help to kind of highlight a few areas and at the same time give it a little bit of skin tone. And then you've got this like pinkish brown that runs along those ridges that run down the spinal column. And then as we get down here to the underside, you have like this light creamy color, and it looks pretty good. The paint application itself is fairly nicely applied. It looks natural enough. Definitely doesn't look bad as far as that goes. Not probably the best color scheme for an Allosaurus, but at the same time, it's not the worst. As far as a size goes, from the snout to the tail, now this is to the tail on mine. It's not an exact measurement because the tail had a little bit left. I don't know exactly how much, but it's roughly in the 10-inch range, or about 25.5 centimeters. The highest point is going to be the tail, so you're looking at about 5 3/4 inches, or around 14.5 centimeters. To the top of the tail and to the top of the head would probably be the tip of the snout, about 4.5 inches, or around 11.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, Robert Muldoon, and the Attack Pack Colovosaurus next to this Allosaurus, and you can see that the Allosaurus does have some pretty good size to it. It's not as large as the Tyrannosaurus is in the line, or actually I believe the Velociraptor as well is larger than this, so that does show you that the figures do not follow any type of a scale, that is for sure. But it also shows you that as far as the size goes, this one isn't any type of a slouch in the size department. It definitely packs a punch as far as how large it is. So this National Geographic Wildlife WoW Allosaurus is alright. It's not really that great. Honestly, I think the sculpt is probably the weakest out of all of the figures I've reviewed so far from the Wildlife WoW line. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. I feel like this figure is almost screaming for a repaint because the paint application on it as well is kind of ugly. There's really not much going on to it, and I'm not a big fan of the blue that they've used on the figure. I also don't really like the sculpt as far as looking like an Allosaurus. I don't really feel like it does look like an Allosaurus. You don't see Allosaurus portrayed with the ridges down the spine too often, as well as that kind of line of osteoderms, so I feel like that is a little bit of a strange look for the Allosaurus. Not to mention the Allosaurus's head sculpt in general doesn't look that close. I mean, it looks sort of close. They at least have like a crest and everything on it, like above the eye area, but it doesn't really look that close to an Allosaurus either. The only real dead giveaway to what people would probably consider this being an Allosaurus is the 3 fingers. That's not to say that Allosaurus is clearly the only theropod that had 3 fingers, because that's not the case. But I feel like the 3 fingers thing is something that people always look at theropods and say, oh, well, it doesn't have 2 fingers, it's not a Tyrannosaurus, so it's got to be an Allosaurus. So, for the most part, I think the figure could definitely be confusing if you didn't have any kind of a title to tell you that this was an Allosaurus. but at the same time, it's kind of an interesting looking figure, but definitely the weakest out of all of the figures that I've reviewed from the Wildlife WoW line so far. As far as purchasing one of these, I really do not know where to tell you guys to go for it because they used to be on Amazon, but most times now I can't really seem to find them on there anymore. I don't entirely know how many websites actually sell the Wildlife WoW figures. I didn't find this one on the Hobby Lobby website, as you can purchase some of the Wildlife WoW figures on there. So I really don't know, maybe try eBay or just search around. If I can find a link, I will include it in the description. If not, happy hunting, guys. Hopefully you'll find this at some point if you do actually want it. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.